Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneurs on Fire, and catch me on this week of The Jesse T Show.
JLD, what's going on, brother?
Jesse, honored to be here, brother. Let's light it up.
Bro, it is already on fire. The energy is palpable, man. Just our conversation before we jumped on, man. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. One of our great friends, Mark Victor Hansen, brought us together. And, he's done great things in the world, man. So I am just excited and pumped to have you on the show, man. For those couple people in the universe that haven't heard the JLD, man, what's going on in your world? Who are you? And give us some context, brother.
Well, number one, just you and I are just a couple guys from the Northeast. I'm a Mainer. You're from Beantown, Boston, and life is good for sure. I personally escaped, that miserable winter that it's experienced up there. And I now, and for the past 4.5 years, live in the lovely Puerto Rico island down here in the Caribbean, where it's always sunny and taxes are 4%. So as a wealth manager, I know that's a big positive for you, my man. But yeah, grew up, born and raised in Maine, loved it, Southern Maine. So I was only about 90 minutes outside of Boston. Used to go down to the Boston Red Sox games, Celtics fan growing up, obviously Pats fan, all that jazz. And after my first 18 years in Maine, I spent 4 years as an Army cadet on an Army ROTC scholarship at Providence College in Rhode Island. And then post-college, 8 years as an officer in the Army. I did a 13-month tour of duty in Iraq as a tank commander, which means
appreciate your service, brother.
Thank you. You're in charge of 4 tanks and 16 men. So that was a pretty intense experience for sure. After that, though, I went through what I call 6 years of struggle, where I tried a bunch of things, but nothing was really working. Nothing was fulfilling. I was really chasing what I thought was success. I tried law school, dropped out after one semester, tried corporate finance. It just wasn't for me. I tried residential real estate, commercial real estate, and I just wasn't clicking in any of those things, wasn't finding myself happy or fulfilled or any of those things. And then it literally was a quote by Albert Einstein that reached out and slapped me in the face when I read it. And the quote was, "Try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value." And I was like, whoa, here I am, 32 years old, when I read this. And I was like, I've only been chasing success. That's the only thing that I've been chasing. What have I been doing that's actually of value to this world? Like Albert Einstein's claiming that I should be doing. And the answer was kind of nothing. So I said, well, how can I really add value to this world? And I thought about the things that were adding value in my life. And interestingly enough, Jesse, at that time in 2012, podcasts were adding massive value to my life because I loved the medium. I understood it. I just really got the fact that, it was free, it was on demand, and it was targeted content. I could listen to a podcast about wealth, about health, about music, about sports, press play and pause when I wanted to. I mean, I was out in San Diego at the time and radio was crap. I don't want to listen about the San Diego Chargers or Miley Cyrus on the radio. I wanted to be in the car listening to what I wanted to be listening to. And so I said, okay, well, now I know how I'm getting value. What's missing in the podcasting space? And I said, well, my biggest complaint about the podcasts that I love, which are podcasts that interview successful entrepreneurs, is that they come out once a week. And I'm like, I get it because it's a lot of work, but to me, once a week isn't enough because I listen to an episode on Monday. I got to wait 7 days for the next episode. I mean, hello, we live in a binging culture. I get all of my Netflix on one day. Why can't I get all the podcasts I want on one day? So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go find the daily podcast that interviews entrepreneurs. And it didn't exist, Jesse. It did not exist. And then my mind was blown. I was like, there's a void that needs to be filled. There needs to be a daily podcast that interviews entrepreneurs. And guess what? That's my opportunity. Like Gandhi said, be that change you want to see in the world. I said, why can't I step into that void, create the first daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs? And so, Jesse, I launched that podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, back in September of 2012. And the day that I launched, it was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs.
Damn.
Jesse, it was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. And so when people are like, John, how do I become the best? I'm like, be the only, then you'll be the best. You'll also be the worst, but you'll be the best. And I, by the way, was bad at interviewing people, at podcasting, at communicating, at public speaking. I was bad at all of those things, but I did it every single day. I put in the reps. And I got a little bit better every single time that I did it. And luckily I had people like Mark Victor Hansen and Tim Ferriss and Gary Vaynerchuk and Seth Godin on my podcast. So like the show was great because of them and their content. And over time, Entrepreneurs on Fire, became a very popular podcast, was awarded Best of Apple iTunes. It's now getting over 1.4 million listens every single month. And by year 2, it was a 7-figure a year business. And that's net profit for all of you wealth people out there. You can understand 7 figures in gross. I'm not gonna say it's easy to do, but you can make 1 million easily if you're spending 2 million. And some people do that. And they're like, oh, I made $1 million last year, but I spent $2 million doing it. So not impressive. This has been a 7-figure net profit a year business for the 7th year in a row, 2013 all the way to 2020. And now we're into 2021. And it's been something I'm very proud of. And also that I'm very transparent about. Something that you might really appreciate being a financial guy is for 88 months in a row now, Jesse, 88 months, I've published a monthly income report every single month that has all of my numbers, every dollar I've made, every dollar I've spent, the stupid decisions I've made, the stupid mistakes I've had, the successes I've had that hopefully can be emulated by people that read these reports. And every month for 88 months, our net profit has been over $100,000. Sometimes over 200, over 400. We had our biggest month of 500 net profit before. And like, that's been something. So it's been a very consistent business for the past 8 years, interviewing successful entrepreneurs, sharing value with the world. To sum it up, Albert Einstein was right. Be a person of value.
Beautiful, brother. There's so much to unpack there. And the 4 core tenets I feel like I got from that conversation piece, I want to touch on them. From growing up in the Northeast, a little bit of that mentality, because I'm familiar with it, and some of the things that inspired you or, altered you there, to Army, military, to the entrepreneurial journey, to podcasting. So bring it back to good old Maine. Were you born and raised in Maine? And what was that experience like for you, and shifting and building a mindset that kind of brought you to where you are today?
Born and raised in Maine, very small town, 2,000 people. Went to a high school that's made up of like 7 towns. So it was like a very country Maine growing up, but it was cool. It was kind of like all I knew. I mean, I did have actually family in Rosendale, down, a little south of Boston. So we did go into the city quite a bit to visit them and to see that. So I knew that world existed, but at the same time, it was like, that was not my day to day. And so it was a cool kind of small town vibe. I mean, my father was a small town lawyer and he worked for himself. And that was kind of my first really exposure to seeing the fact that, hey, when you work for yourself, you have a lot of freedom, a lot of control, a lot of responsibility, and you got to really be willing to work hard. But when I called my dad up at 2 p.m. and said, hey, I'm out of school, you want to come down and play catch at the park, he would do it. And I'm not just saying like once a week, like 3, 4, 5 days a week, we would do that. And there were some days, he had to say, hey, John, like I've got to work till 9 p.m. tonight, so can't do it. Or sometimes he'd come down, play with me for an hour, and then get back to the office because he had to do that. But I saw that like there was that flexibility, and there wasn't like this, the man authority or the woman like always telling you what to do and how to do it. Like he was off, conquering his own foes, which I found very interesting and very entrepreneurial. So great Maine experience, loved it. Definitely wanted to stay in the Northeast for college, which is why I stayed at Providence College. I mean, I actually almost went to Boston College as well, because I thought that was a cool school. I just didn't like that your freshman year, you had to live like at the satellite campus. And then I was not into that. Providence is like small, it's compact. It's all right on this one beautiful campus in Providence. And I made the right decision. Yeah, dude, it's crazy. Joe Rogan talks about this all the time because he's a Boston guy for the most part. And just the mentality you have to have growing up in the Northeast, and I'm a Boston guy, and just the harsh winters and just dealing with the fast pace. I mean, it definitely builds a different breed of person, kind of prepared for, really anything, like when you're living in a blizzard for 9 months out of the year and you're trying to like build a life. And it's incredible that your father, because I am a father myself, and it's paramount for me to spend time with them as much as possible, and quality time. Be present, be mindful, get on the floor with them, play with them the way that they want to play, and just show up for them. And so it sounds like he was a great impact on you. And was he an inspiration for you to join the Army? And how did that take place? Was that something where
like me, I saw a couple commercials for the Navy and I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And I had, my mom was Army, my grandfather was Army. I had all these people influencing me. Where did that influence come from? And was he part of that decision for you?
Absolutely. I come from a family of those who have served. My grandfather was in the Navy in World War II. My other grandfather was in the Army in both World War II and the Korean War. And my father was in the Army as well. He was a JAG officer and he spent actually 32 years total in the Army, like most of that in the reserves, but he was in the Army for that whole time. And he actually went to Georgetown on an ROTC scholarship. And so that was kind of a path that I saw where I could go to college because and not get, killed by debt, which I know a lot of your clients see, unfortunately, because it's just the world that we live in. And he really did instill those financial values in me. And so I was like, you know what? I don't necessarily have this unbelievable drive to join the Army or any military service. I really didn't, but I saw it as a really great path to go to college for free on a scholarship and, come out the other side, with a solid job and see what that was like going forward. Now, I did not know that my senior year of college, the World Trade Towers were going to get hit. And then all of a sudden it was going to turn to, what looked like was going to be 4 years of a peacetime service into a war. And so it was crazy, basically like 20 months after that happened, I was in Iraq on tanks, fighting a war. Whereas if that had never happened, I would have just, had your pretty standard typical 4 years to 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army doing your thing. So just kind of interesting, how life's twists and turns can take you. And, I think maybe the big takeaway is every decision you make can have big consequences down the line. So that decision, I was like, yeah, I'll just do ROTC so I can go to college for free. Actually ended up meaning, a number of years later, I was in war, getting shot at, having friends killed, and seeing all of that happen. So take your decisions, don't take your decisions lightly because you never know which ones are going to have the big impacts. Well,
brother, again, thank you so much for your service. And, it's incredible making that ultimate sacrifice and doing something bigger than yourself, whether it's your battle buddy, so to speak, whether it's the nation, whether it's your family. There's a calling to some people, no matter how you get there. And I'm sure once you were there and once you were on the battlefield and started experiencing essentially hell on earth, your perspective probably changed pretty quickly. And
that's actually the biggest word that I hang on to be honest. A lot of people are like, you seem like you're pretty happy most of the time. You seem like you're a positive guy and yada, yada. And I'm like, well, when you go through what I've gone through and you're having a bad day, which we all have, but then I'm like, is it really as bad as that day that a mortar round, dropped, 50 feet from my head and, almost decapitated me? No, that was a worse day. So let's have some perspective. And that is something honestly that really, really does help. I'm not going to say that I didn't go through my share of PTSD after, the war and going through that in my mid to late 20s. It's something that, you just have to deal with because it's such emotional trauma. But the reality is, once you kind of get out on the other side, you will always have that perspective if you choose to keep it. And, for me, it's perspective, it's gratitude, and just, living every day for what it is.
You can't appreciate the light without the dark. It's you have to be able to, this weekend we had a men's transformational weekend, about 6 of us. And, my buddy, I mentioned to you, Lane, before we jumped on, we're really big into consciousness awakening and just spirituality and growing. And, a lot of the narrative that came up was, if your light is bright within, you can really go into the darkness kind of unfettered and come back the same person. And so when you have these experiences of shit, right? I've held my daughter till she died. I held my mom till she died. I understand death just like you do. You've seen death. You've probably had buddies or people that worked in and around you that were, maimed or killed. And that really brings perspective of time, right? So the value of a moment and what you do in that moment matters. So I think it's beautiful that, it's a hard way to live it and a hard way to experience it, but the perspective you have now and the gratitude you have now is probably what makes you a happy human being, and it keeps you successful and on path.
I agree.
Yeah, brother. So now when you're in the military, what was the total time in the military?
4 years active, 4 years in the reserve. So 8 years total.
So the big thing too, and I've experienced this myself, and I know a bunch of people that are vets, transitioning isn't always the easiest in a sense of, there's a parallel between, pro athletes and military where you have your uniform, you have your jersey, and that's your identity to a sense, right? And that's how people look at you, and even as an officer, there's an esteem there where, you have this kind of upper level, like people are looking at you as a leader and they're saluting you and they're looking to you for advice. And so you have this kind of, pedestal in a sense. Even if you're humble, you still kind of have this thing where now when you leave that behind, there takes some work to get through that and to transition back into society and transition from war and transition from military lifestyle. What was that transition like for you? What were some of your learnings and teachings from that moment?
It was tough. And, like I said, I did deal with PTSD and I did deal with that sense. And I think the best way of putting it is being irrelevant. Like you go from being quite relevant where, you have a chain of command above you who's giving you orders. You have a chain of command below you who's you're giving orders to and who's counting on you and who's relying on you and is, essentially looking to you for decisions, for answers, to like, nobody really cares if I wake up in the morning. Like, of course, my mother cares and my father cares and my friends like hypothetically care. But I mean, like, it's just like sometimes when I got out and I kind of took like a year off because, I was able to do that like financially and just thought it was, I want to do some traveling and stuff like that. I'd be like, man, like, I don't have to get out of this bed this morning. And like, nobody would honestly even really know or care. And it was kind of a weird feeling, just being irrelevant, not being relevant. And I think that's a huge struggle that people go through when they retire. Like they just stop being relevant in this world. Like they spend their whole life saying, I'm going to stay at this job that I hate because when I retire, it's the glory years and I can then thrive. And then they retire and the day after they're like, wow, not only am I old because I had to stay in this crappy paying job for so long to have enough money for retirement, but I'm not relevant. And I didn't expect to feel this way. And that's why there's a lot of people who, kill it in the entrepreneurial world and they build this company and then they sell it and they look back and they say the worst day of my life was selling the company, or the day after selling my company. Cause like that was their personality. That was who they were. That represented them. And I kind of get that, I mean, I get like what that is. And that's kind of why I've always been building a brand that was like so featured on me. Cause I'm like, I'm not building this to sell. Like I'm building this to give value, to share with the world, not just so that it can get a multiple and be bought by some company. And it's just really interesting when you really look deep at those kind of things. And it kind of goes back to something we've been talking about quite a bit on our chat, which is, perspective. It's like, it gives you that perspective that you can learn from those who have gone before you. Like we don't have to learn all the lessons ourselves. And that's why I've interviewed over 3,000 people now in my life, because I love learning from their mistakes, their failures, their struggles, their obstacles, their challenges. Like to me, that's power. And so I'm not exactly sure if I answered your question directly, but I mean, like, to me, that's kind of an important topic to talk about because it's really key that people realize, like, again, every decision you make is going to have a big impact and maybe not the one you expect.
Brother, you're singing to my soul with being a student at heart. It's one of those things where it affords you to step up and be a leader, but you have to be a student. You have to be, self-aware and humble and learn from other people. And that's the best way to do it. Like I remember when I was a kid growing up in Eastie, when I was playing sports, I would look at other people like upperclassmen or friends that were better at something. And I would plug into them and I would find out, how are you doing this? What's going on here? And I would try to emulate or learn from their work that they're putting in to try to get better at basketball or get better at football or baseball. And it's kind of like what you're doing with the podcast. And even for my podcast, where I'm bringing on people that I'm learning from, and it's great conversation and it can help other people, but the stories and the journeys of others are what's important. And I think one of the lessons that I've learned that you've touched on completely there is a lot of people, when they retire or exit a business, they start dying. Like they have nothing else to live for. It's like, yes, if you have a great exit, 7, 8, 9-figure exit out of a company that you've built, that's wonderful. But there needs to be something next, because a lot of times people lose purpose and they lose the ability to feel relevant and feel wanted and needed. And so whether that's socially, whether that's business wise, I think it's super important to plan for those things and know where you're coming from. Where for you, you don't want to sell the business or most of the business. You want to keep doing this. And for me, I personally will sell my wealth business potentially down the road if I want to. I'm building it to do that, but I could just keep it until I die. But then the other things I'm doing will afford me the opportunity to go travel around the world, go to Peru and do ayahuasca, go do these different things that I'm into.
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, hell yeah, brother. Have you had any experience with that?
No. What about Bufo? You done that?
The Bufo frog. No. So is Bufo DMT? Do you know?
Yeah, it's like the God molecule, right?
Okay. Yeah. The spirit. Yeah, absolutely. So I found plant medicines about a year ago, and it's completely changed my life. It's changed things.
For a lot of vets, by the way, too. Like a lot of vets that are in the throes of despair. Like I honestly believe that would have been amazing for me during my PTSD experience. Like I wish I was aware of it at that time. I've never taken any of those things personally at this stage in my life, just because I feel like I don't know. This is just me personally. I just feel like you need to like really want to and feel like there's a reason to.
Yes.
And that's my personal opinion. And I respect other people saying, oh no, it's for or whatever it is. But like, I don't want to right now. There may be a time in the future that I want to, and then I will. But I feel like there's definitely a time in my past when I needed it. I just didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
It's helping a lot of vets.
100%. And you definitely have to be called to the work, called to the medicine. It's not something where you should just willy-nilly just go do something, because
I think my problem is I had a really bad weed experience in my younger age, like a really, really bad. It must have been laced with something.
Okay.
And it just kind of like flipped something in my mind in a bad way for like a long time, which luckily seemed to, during the trip, which seemed to flip back. Yeah. Luckily. But now I'm just always having this thing of like, I just don't want to flip that thing again.
No. And I hear you. And again, brother, it's, we all get our medicine, quote unquote, from different avenues, but it absolutely is something that's coming back online, specifically within the veteran community and helping things with PTSD, anxiety, depression, drug addiction. It's incredible that these natural, unaltered, essentially gifts is what they are. I could get a little woo-woo on you, but basically these medicines have been given to us to be able to help us and guide us through things spirituality wise and relationship wise and business wise. And for the vet community, man, there's already studies that have come out specifically from Johns Hopkins saying that psilocybin treatment is 4 times more effective than any antidepressant on the market. And there's so much power to that. There's people that are out there that don't know where to turn. And I mentioned my buddy Lane Balone, who was on the show before. He's actually still here in Atlanta with me, about to go back to the airport. He's a Green Beret. He's someone who's experienced some of the best that the Army has to offer in terms of like, the world and the engagements. And, he works in a community with other veterans, and he's seen the power of these medicines and how they help people too. And so I think it's super important for people just to be aware. And if you're called to those things, explore it. And if not, there's other ways. There's breath work, there's working out, there's meditation, there's all these different things.
And I do all those things. Like I'm really big in breath work. I love, for me, workout every day is mandatory. Meditation. I love all of that jazz. And it's kind of a funny side note. When we were talking pre-interview and you're like, yeah, I literally have a Green Beret in my bedroom or something up right now, or like in the next room. I was just like, oh, he's just talking about, he has like a Green Beret, like an actual, like hanging on your wall or something. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. But now it's like, I found out it's actually a real person.
It's a person. Yeah. His name's Lane. I'll get you guys connected. I think there's a lot of synergy between the two of you. But as far as now going into the entrepreneurial journey after the military, what was that first foray? What was that experience? Did you fall flat on your face? Did you gain some tools for the utility belt? Like, what did that look like for you?
Did not fall flat on my face. I just hit a flipping grand slam with my first swing, which can be, by the way, a curse for people. It can definitely be a curse. Luckily, I've been able to continue to go from strength to strength with that. And by the way, I've had plenty of fallings on my faces after my first grand slam, trying different things that just didn't work and completely flopping. So I've experienced plenty of that over my life. And even again, post launching my podcast, which was a grand slam. But I just got lucky. Like I said, I just found that void that was in the podcast space back in 2012 when there just wasn't that many people doing the podcast thing. And it just clicked. It was just like, this was needed in the marketplace. And it just crushed. It's like when you see that product that comes out, and you're just like, oh, it's so obvious why that's a success. Like Dollar Shave Club is like, obviously people would rather, have like this easy way to get nice, sharp razors every month and pay like $1 for it instead of like, getting completely screwed by Gillette. Yeah. And it just makes sense. Like my podcast just made sense. And all it took was execution, which was like working harder than anybody else at that time in the podcasting space, because nobody was willing to do a daily podcast because they didn't see the return on that time investment. Like my mentors back then were like, John, you'll never find enough guests. You'll never find enough time to do it. You'll never be able to build a business around that. And they were completely wrong. But what I took from them was, man, if the top people in the podcasting industry say it can't be done, and I figure out a way to do it, that's a huge opportunity. And that's exactly what I did. I figured out a way to do it. And I did a daily podcast for 2,000 days in a row. Didn't miss a day for 2,000 days. That's 5.5 years. And then I since have shifted back to a 4 to 5 day per week podcast release. So it's still a ton, just not 7 days per week at this time currently. But that was the first swing of the bat that I made in the entrepreneurial space. I had done nothing entrepreneurially up to that point. I had tried law school, quit corporate finance, commercial real estate. I'm like, I'm going to try this entrepreneurial thing. Let's launch a podcast. And it just crushed it. Now, I didn't make money overnight. Like, it took me about 6 months to make like my first couple $1,000s. And then it took me 13 months where I then had a huge jump because I launched a course. And I had my first 6-figure month at the 13-month point. And then since that 13 month, I've done 88 months in a row of 6 figures of net profits every single month. And it just clicked. So that part, my first swing, grand slam, done a couple other things that have been really successful over the past 8 years. Nothing that's, been to the level of success as the podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire. And as I openly admit in these income reports that we release every single month on our website, plenty of flops, like just part of the journey, flopping.
I love how transparent you are with the journey and with the income reports. There's I'm a wealth manager, I'm a fiduciary. So I really work with clients intently on how to be wealthy, but how to get there happily, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, like in terms of no regret or perspective, but enjoying the journey and not waiting until you're 65 to retire, not waiting until you're older to kind of do what you want, but like learning how to do those things now while still effectively building out a crazy good future. And being able to, number one, this is just a note for all entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs that are listening. When you're running a business, whether it's a podcast, whether it's, a manufacturing company, whatever the hell it is, you need to know your numbers, and you need to know month in, month out, income, cash flow, debt, all these different things. So for you to be able to put out a monthly report, obviously it's almost like it shows how well things are going, and it's a great, inspiration to other people. Where did you get that insight? Because I think that's very important as an entrepreneur to know your numbers and know what you're doing, but it's also great for, getting other people excited and motivated on what's going on.
It's a good point. And it's actually one of our most trafficked posts every single month on our site. We get featured in monthly roundup income reports of, other people that produce these income reports. And like, that's another, big feature as well. And something that you might find kind of cool too, is that we actually bring our CPA on every single month to give a tax tip. We bring our lawyer on to give a legal tip. And that's also very beneficial because it's like an entrepreneurial, business-minded legal tip. And, but to your kind of major question, which is, like, what like kind of was the inspiration for that? Back in 2011, 2012, and I was starting to think about getting into the entrepreneurial game, I found this guy called Pat Flynn. He's running a podcast called Smart Passive Income, and a blog also called Smart Passive Income. And he was releasing income reports. I mean, he's since stopped doing those a number of years ago, but he was releasing them. And I was just super inspired to see, hey, you can be a good guy, like providing great value, a family man, and like not be some slimy kind of sketchy person on the internet, and making money, like real money. And he was making real money. So that was just super cool to see. It kind of gave me that, inspiration and motivation to say, okay, I can do this. And then I remember saying to myself, well, if I ever get to the point where I'm making real, like good revenue, I want to share that with other people. I want to share inspiration for other podcasters and online entrepreneurs that there are ways to generate revenue by adding value in the world. Because a lot of people are like, how do you make money? Podcasts are free to listen to. And I'm like, well, go to my income reports and you can see 13 different revenue streams that I've created, all that are making money.
Incredible. And that is a flip for a lot of brand new entrepreneurs and this is just a business thing anyway, in terms of just making money with your business or your podcast. And this is something in my journey that I've come to learn in podcasting, going from sponsor, ad reads or going from guests that'll pay to be on the show and all these, the courses that are embedded. There's so many different ways and angles, but it's the execution piece, which you keep kind of narrating. It's all the best ideas in the world are in the graveyard. There's the graveyard's like the wealthiest place in the world, is what they say, because there's so many brilliant ideas that never came to fruition, whether it was time, execution, yada, yada, yada. And most coaches in any discipline in the world, when they're really good, they can get you to execute. And they can get you to do what the thing is that you weren't doing. And that's generally why you hire them. So when you hire someone to help you with your podcast, it's because you don't know something or you need to execute something. And that's when people need to hire me to build out wealth, business owners, families. It's things that I can show them and help them execute on. It's everything. The idea is wonderful and the process is great, but the execution is what determines success. And so with the podcast, there's a couple questions I have there. As a podcaster, this is just me being greedy. And, I got started a couple of years ago and I'm the one episode per week guy. And it's one of those things where I have so many episodes in the chamber now that like I'm starting to, release. I'm going to start releasing more than one a week as we go. But the question I had is, when it came to starting the podcast, where did you learn from the video side, from the audio side, from the flow of the conversation side? Like, who were some of your inspirations or teachers that helped you get started?
Well, number one, let me just go into coaching mode for a second. Listen, once a week is for amateurs, and you're not. I
love to call me out, brother. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's just us New Englanders. We say it straight for sure. But the fact is, you're not an amateur, so that's why you've got to step your game up here. And this is one thing I'd say to you is, like, you're doing these long form, great interviews once per week, and of course, it takes a lot of time, energy, and bandwidth. And a lot of people are like, I really couldn't do 2 of these per week, and maybe you can because you're running a wealth business, whatever it might be. But like, what you're missing out on is, there's a great opportunity for people just to hear from you, like just you one-on-one video, mano a mano, woman to, man to woman, whatever your listener is, and just listen to you give a 5 or 10 minutes wealth tip or life tip or whatever tip that might be, where you're just releasing every Monday per se. You're releasing this long form interview with a great guest like myself. And then on Thursdays, you're doing this 5 or 10 minute value packed one-on-one, just crazy good, high value release of one tip, one answer to one question, one Q&A, whatever that might be. And now you're doubling your episodes. And right now the spotlight's on me. I'm your guest. Like, you're asking me the questions. I'm providing, a lot of value here. You're providing value too, but I mean, the spotlight's mostly on me here. This is a chance for you to have the spotlight just on you. Like, you're just the person that they're talking to your audience. It's going to build a more intimate relationship with them and really cast you as the hero, cast you as the person adding, value, as somebody that's really making an impact on their life. So you've got to go to 2 episodes per week immediately. You should have done it 2 years ago, but you didn't hire me as a coach. Right. So you kind of got screwed, and now you just have to try to play catch up, but all is well in the world.
All that to be said, sold. I was sold on the idea of going to multiple episodes a week, and now it'll be 3 because I was going to 2, and now it'll be 3, brother. And I'm going to take that tip because that's something I've toggled with before. Initially for the Jesse T show side of things, it was Jesse T's toolbox, just like this little thing where I would have this insights on what's going on in my business, my world. But now it's changed so much over the last couple of years with the path of being put on the spirituality path and the health and wellness, the biohacking, and all the things that I have going on, that when I talk in normal conversation with people, they're either impacted by, they want to learn more about. So that's a beautiful tip. It's a beautiful tip.
And a great idea too. And this is for people that are listening as well, is like, right after we're done talking and I say bye and you hang up with me, you should flip back on the video and say, all right, we're going to do my favorite 3 things that we just, that John and I talked about over this interview. And for 5 or 10 minutes, you just go over those 3 favorite things and you release that as a separate episode. So now you have your Monday long form episode with me. On Wednesday, you have the recap episode where you just share your favorite 3 things from this episode, just you and the camera in your audience. And that's another amazing episode that then people are going to just listen to that sometimes. And then they'll be like, oh, I could go listen to that whole episode. Now they're going to go back when they would have skipped that like 45-hour long episode because they didn't think they had time for it. Now they're going to listen to the whole thing because you've really whet their appetite for it. And then you're doing other episodes on Fridays, like you said, that spirituality, whatever it might be, this or that. So a lot of opportunity.
We just went to 4 episodes.
There you go. 4. You're almost up to me. I'm at 5 episodes per week. You're soon to be a baller.
Wait, listen, I feel like I already am, but now I'm going to be like a big baller,
Baller.
Balling. All right. Hell yeah, brother. What's going on in your world these days? You're living down in Puerto Rico. You're doing the thing. What's keeping you happy, healthy, and motivated, brother? What are you working
Well,
towards?
what's keeping me happy is paying 4% tax. Because when you get to keep the money you make, life is different. Having to write a 7-figure check to the government, which I had to do 2 years in a row, you're never going to be happy living that life. But keeping all that money, I came down, bought a mansion on the Caribbean. It was a $2 million beautiful home on the Caribbean. In 17 months, I'd saved more money in taxes than I paid for the house. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that makes you happy. What keeps me healthy is, I'm working out every day. Infrared sauna. I've got breath work. I've got stretching. I've got a virtual trainer I work out with 3 days per week. I'm working out 7 days per week overall, though, eating pretty healthy. I'm not perfect, but I eat pretty healthy, doing all those things. And, on the business side of things, like I have been 100% focused in 2020 on one thing, which was obviously the year past, of writing my first traditionally published book. HarperCollins signed me to a contract. We locked it in. I wrote 71,000 words in 2020. That's 273 pages. So this is a meaty, healthy business book, which is called The Common Path to Uncommon Success. And the book is a 17-step roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. And Jesse, it comes from the 3,000 plus interviews I've done over the past 8 years. I took all the learnings from that and I distilled it into 17 steps. It's not complicated. Like these are the 17 steps that all successful entrepreneurs take chronologically, step 1 through step 17, to achieve their version of uncommon success. And, man, I'm just fired up. The book goes live in March. Pre-orders are available now. We have 5 sick bonuses for anybody that just pre-orders. And Jesse, you're a wealth guy. So you'd be like, John, you're stupid. Why would you say that? Because I am literally shipping. I have 3 journals I created over the years: the Freedom Journal, the Mastery Journal, and the Podcast Journal. These guys sell for $45 on Amazon each. I'm shipping all 3 to your door if you pre-order the $17 Kindle version. Like, am I losing money on every single pre-order? I am losing money on every single pre-order, but I don't care. Like, I'm just trying to get this book out to the world. I'm super excited about it. And again, we have 5 bonuses. That's just one of the bonuses. There's 4 other amazing bonuses. And it's just my life's passion. I'm looking to get it out to the world.
Hell yeah, brother. There's so much we have in concert and unison. And in terms of writing a book, I'm almost done with mine. It's actually called Happy Wealth, 10 ways to become
happy wealth.
Yeah, 10 ways to becoming wealthy happily. From a poor kid from Boston, nonetheless. So
yeah, and that's key, man. Because listen, you can be like really rich and really unhappy. Like I know these people, and there's a lot of people like John. Like I have a 3-person team. So it's myself and my fiance, and then we have 3 virtual assistants. Like you could build your team bigger, and you could do this and that. And I'm just like, you can make so much more money, and I'm like, I could, but like, I'm so happy right now with how things are. Like, I don't want to screw with that. Like I'm really good, like putting a couple $1 million in the bank every single year, investing it conservatively and wisely, and just letting it go. And like, to me, that's happy money. Unhappy money would be like making $10 million a year with a big team, barely netting as much money as I'm netting now, maybe netting a little bit more hypothetically, but like, I don't need it. Don't want it.
Brother, you're speaking to the reality of the people that I know that are wealthy. If they got sick, God forbid, or something happened where their life was on the line, they would trade all their wealth to be healthy. And the same thing for happiness. What's the point of having all the money if you're not happy? And it's money can buy things and buy experiences, but the wealthy people have time, they have happiness, they have health, and they have all that money in the background.
I have all those things.
Beautiful, brother. I love it. Yeah, we could dive into biohacking for days. All these things that you're into, I'm into as well. But I'm excited for the book. When's the book come out?
So the book comes out in March, but I'm really pushing pre-orders now because that really gets like Amazon behind the book, and their pre-order run is huge. So if anybody wants to check out a little bit more about the book, we have awesome details. I did a video and all that stuff over at uncommonsuccessbook.com. uncommonsuccessbook.com.
You got it, brother. We'll have that in the show notes, all the ways for people to connect with you, plug into you, utilize your wizardry, as I'd call it. You're a wizard on a path. I'm excited to be on the journey with you in any way I can add value, support you, brother. You are amazing, mighty, powerful, the one, the only JLD. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of the Jesse T Show.